Welcome to Rambling of a Madman. In this episode, I would like to ramble on about the topic of being a middle class citizen. Well, being middle class is actually an economic status. Though it seems that being a middle class person is somewhat of a privilege in a economy like this. You have made it halfway through. Life is easy and you have access to good things in life. That is the scenario that is normally there when you define a middle class family or a person who is in the middle class, who is, I think it is safe to say, a financially stable person. This is what a general description of middle class is. There can be different definitions, political, financial, obviously, uh, social, but the I was thinking about the practical nature, the practicality of being a middle class person, because in different countries, depending on the amount of GDP or the annual income of people, if you calculate it, the people in the middle are normally known as the middle class. But then again, if you are in a higher income country, then the middle class would have basically a good salary. But then again, if you are in a lower income country, then that middle class doesn't have the luxuries or the facilities of the other people who are in a higher income country. So that got me thinking, being in a middle class family or being a middle class person and who has, let's say, a financial status in a balanced place. Though people define it like this, a comfortable living and things like that, with the current economic system and looking at different economies around the world, this is actually debatable. And that is the part that I want to talk about, rather than looking into the numbers of different, maybe the central bank, or looking at the numbers that are shown to us on mainstream media or something like that. The actual practicality, the ground level truth, the practicality of being a middle class person. There's a reason that I thought about this, because in this harsh time period, if you are a middle class person who, let's say, lost their job, you will face an immediate danger and a threat, not only financially but socially also, because you may have, you are used to some kind of a social status, it could be, or you are used to some kind of a lifestyle. You may have property or things like that. Everything in your life comes under threat. Now apply this to a person who's really rich. When you talk about a really rich person, and let's say a person who's in executive state, we can simply say, under the current economy around of the world, that person would have extra cash or extra wealth or extra property that can be converted into wealth to preserve the person's lifestyle, to preserve what the wealthy person has till things get back to normal. If you take it the other way around, the poorest in the world, uh, that means if you are very poor, the things that you have to lose, maybe the property or maybe the wealth, is virtually non-existent. This is the situation. Like if you are very poor, I'm not meaning this in an insulting way. I'm just trying to, because if you say a very very poor person, if you have the ability to imagine that a poor person may be living in a far away rural area, which most of the time would be doing their own cultivation, and they will be there on their own lifestyle. If you take that scenario into account, you will a little bit understand that they are self-sufficient. So that though economically, if you categorize them as low income families or a low income person, but in that retrospect, losing of money is not a much bigger problem or a burden to them as well. So in this spectrum of income, the highest income or the richest and the lowest income or the poorest have a lesser impact when the economy goes down from, than the middle class, because the middle class is a very unstable position. Depending on each economy, depending on each country, there will be debt taken in, there will be loans, there will be leasings, they will depend on jobs, because most of the jobs are services that is rendered, and the money is earned through that way. They will be living in apartment or for rent in a good place, is they will be more using in digital equipment, they will be pumping money into the economy. But overall, all these things leave the middle class in edge, where loss of the job or the fall of the economy will impact them very harshly and very hardly, because they have to get used to a life which they were not prepared. Either they are not willing to go, while carrying the burdens of being in debt, either credit card for land, and not being able to pay rent, and so on and so on. So as you can see, middle class is this challenging position where people are fighting to have a good life, a better life, either to increase their income and go to a much more better position. Whatever it is, that even if you look at articles, middle class is a very important thing for our economy, because they are the ones who fund and keep money moving in economy. But what is a middle class person? What are the privileges that are there? Because from different country to country, this might change. One of the example is property. Is a middle class person eligible for property? Is a middle class person has the economic power to purchase property, or is it the rent, that renting a place is a thing that a middle class person do? It depends on, I think, country to country. Basically, most some countries a middle class person will be able to purchase a property, a land for their own, and the next thing that will be following is that particular person will be looking to pass on that property to their children or the next generation. But in some areas we can define, if you define in some areas, as in some countries, which is when the property value is, well, when the property value goes ridiculously high, most of the time, even though they are categorized as middle class, the economic status will not allow them to purchase land or property to build their home, or because simply it's a financial burden. They are not able to pay such a big amount. So thus meaning that uh, in different countries middle class people would have property and others will not have. Same thing comes to when owning vehicles. When you go into countries with lower GDPs and lower per capita income, taxation on vehicles are also very high. When when land area is limited in small countries, then again this taxation for vehicles are very high. Due to this reason, owning a vehicle in such countries is a luxury, and it is a very big burden for middle class families to pump money into a vehicle that is overpriced. The the best example that I can think of is at this moment is United States. United States is a country that is friendly for vehicles. Purchasing a vehicle is very easy. We have seen stories that people who have lost their homes, unable to pay rent, will live in their houses, sorry, in their vehicles. Though it is an unfortunate thing, the surprising part of it is that these people are able to purchase vehicles with ease. So in United States, a middle class family will have the luxury to purchasing a vehicle with a very little difficulty, a very little financial burden on their pockets. But in some countries that is not there. If the so so defining a middle class family from what they have is quite a little bit difficult, it seems, because it depending on the country, the policies, the geography, and everything. A middle class family and the things they own will change. But one thing for sure, a middle class is an unstable place to stay according to the current situation. Because how do you define a middle class family or a rich person? What is the difference? I think still there's only two ways that a person, a financial status can be of a person can be defined. Either the person have to ration the money that they have and distribute it properly between food, rent, electricity bills, phone bills, cable bills, and so on. And in the same way, the rich can be defined the opposite. People who doesn't need to ration money accordingly, they can spend money the whatever the way they want. They don't need to, when buying a vehicle or when buying land, they don't need to ration money for the next few months to balance the accounts, something like that. So the middle class, depending on the definition, it would be a best or actually a property of both worlds, where you will be have the ability to do extra things, maybe spend on a land, a good phone, on or any electricity devices, and but while doing that, rationing money should be done, but there won't be any burden of paying in for food and for the basics to food, water, electricity. The money will be there. If you are doing something extra, then you have to ration money. Something on the lines of that would be middle class. That is the definition of middle class, but the reality of it is the middle class is a place where you are on a particularly a knife edge at every given moment, because the truth is every middle class house one way or another is in debt. Credit card is would be the number one factor. Number two will be families that are in middle class would be have to pay their medical bills, or how to spend money to education, for education of their children, for higher education and so on. That would be, depending on different countries, a different value, but I'm talking generally. So buying a vehicle, that's one of them. Then the property that you have to live in, whether you have to find a land to build your house, and you have to take a loan to pay that, or otherwise go into rent. Either way, a monthly amount will be given away for that as well. Well, if you take all that, and though we can say that they have a house, they have a place to live, it's like then little by little the definition of a poor person is much more relevant to a middle class family than being a rich person. This is especially when coming into middle class families of uh, developing countries, because they have to spend a lot for their education, for their children's education, and with all these things, um, the end result would be in debt, and being middle class, of course, in developing countries especially, going through that education, that push that is they are given by the being in a middle class family, will prompt you to go into uh, jobs that are with higher wages. But if that opportunity is not there, then what to do? What will happen is the question, because the 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 if you are a middle class family, if you are a child from a middle class, the only way where the only place that you will be targeting is up. You will have the access, you will see that there is opportunity, but most of the time that grabbing hold of that opportunity is hard. Then when something goes wrong, especially during this period where financially it's a problem to the whole world, keeping jobs and so on and so on, because most of the middle class is made out of people who are doing jobs rather than doing businesses. Even so, both ways, when the way of income depreciates, or the way of income just completely vanishes, there is the only other choice is to fall down or becoming poor, which number one is the mental health of a middle class family will be totally affected because of this, because their dream is to move forward. They were in such and such a lifestyle, and all that will be perished in uh, in virtually months, weeks if not. And that the mentality, the mental burden, the psychological burden that will be created because of that would be immense as well. So being in a middle class family is not easy. It's not always is about having everything. It's not always about being rich. Being middle class is not that. And when you are living in a knife's edge all the time, the amount of problems that is there is much more than being rich, being extremely rich, or being extremely poor. This could be seen as a mad ramble, but I think it is important that when you think that if you are a middle class person of United States, it's going to be totally different if you are a middle class person in India. And the economies are totally different. The ways of defining is, the only thing common would be that both of them would be in debt, either in credit cards or something like that. And to balance everything, there should be a way of income, and that when that income goes away, the amount that the middle class family should struggle is immense. Because the truth is, it's not the 1970s or 1960s. There is no safety net for middle class families at all. If you have a safety net and you think you are a middle class family, let me say something to you: you are not. You are very lucky. You are rich. Because the truth of being middle class is that you are trying to push your life to become better and better, and trying to live a good life while risking that there is no safety net to fall on. There's no extra money. You are in debt, and you totally depend on a monthly income which you will ration out to maintain your life, thus helping the entire economy to turn their cogwheels. And then, because of this, the next question would be, though we talk highly about being middle class is a privilege, or being a middle class family, creating middle class families are the best for the economy, what uh, is the next step? What does the governments around the world, or the economic systems around the world, or economic wizards that control these economic systems do to help middle class families to maintain that particular position? And that is the, I think, the most important thing. Because most of the time the middle class is pushed to a level that is telling them to consume, telling them to, you can reach up, that you can be rich, you can move forward. But economic crisis and other crises, when those things happen, that the society is, especially the financial systems, have pushed them so much in consumption, entertainment and everything, that there will be no safety net to fall upon, and the middle class will reach huge positions of crisis. middle class families uh, who are their parents doing jobs in services, whether you are engineer or doctor or a software developer, or a position that is taking a good salary and is in a middle income family. What about their children? They will spend their money and everything on education, of course. Because of the education, the prices are so high, they will end up being in debt. And here we have the next generation trying to pay that debt and maintain a middle class lifestyle. The properties that the last generation own will be passed on to the next generation, but of course, because the family gets bigger, that property will be also divided. So whatever said and done, the next generation, the new generation of the middle class family, will always be poor or in debt. And every time that everybody started saying being middle class is the dream, or being, it is the burden is immense, because middle class is about living the dream and dreaming to be better, trying to have a life for not only for themselves but for a good life for their next generation. But it is laid upon us such a fragile financial system, or such a fragile society, that when it crumbles, the first hit is to the middle class. Actually, the only hit it would be for the middle class and the poor people. Because have you seen a rich person who is a billionaire or millionaire who got bankrupt and, using the public bus service or the public train service? No. Because of course, this, when you become rich, you, whatever the idea is, that you will have a rainy day fund. That is the intelligent thing to do. We cannot blame them for that, but this is the economic system that is there, and so on. So that's what I was trying to tell. Being middle class, it's not a la-di-da thing, because you are kind of rich, you are able to provide to your family, you will be able to live a good life, there will be entertainment in your life, we will buy whatever you want while being in debt, and while not having a safety net. This is what middle class is about. This The main reason for this ramble is that I was thinking about myself, I was thinking about my friends, and what the stories they have to tell during this time period where financially it's very hard. And the amount of things that is there to be lost being in middle class, around that area, is very high. Either because the same thing, if you talk to a very rich person in the society, for them, of course, they have the economic burdens, they have of the financial burdens of this economic status. But them going bankrupt doesn't mean that they will lose everything. They will have money that is saved, and interest will be produced through that money, so they can live. If being very poor, uh, indeed it would be hard, but again, and there are things that uh, uh, here's another thing. Think about, if you're in a middle class, if you have an engineering degree, if you have a degree in medicine, and if you have a degree in I don't know, if you have a PhD in social science or something like that, and if in this economic status, if your country's economy is in a rut, What are the jobs you will be looking for? You will be looking for engineering. A person with an engineering degree, a bachelor's, master's, or even a PhD would be looking in for a job in that particular sector. They will be not looking for a, a job in a restaurant as a waiter, or a cook, or a person who sweeps the roads, or working to remove the they will garbage. Like, they will not look for such jobs. And that it's like that in itself, like, if you are a skilled worker, normally in the society, that means there will be, that won't be middle class. You will be either working in machinery, you will be working in a construction site or something like that. But when you say a skilled worker, that is a broad perspective. There will be a lot of opportunities and jobs available. But indeed, like, one engineer controls a lot of skilled workers, for welding, for making houses, making buildings, in construction machinery, so on and so on. So, okay, a skilled worker, though, or that person is categorized as poor or low income in this financial world, will have opportunities, while again, a person who's in the middle income area, where uh, will have a very hard time trying to find a job and trying to survive. This is not an easy thing. So I'm I being in the lower income category is not easy. The life is not easy. The it is a problem of its own. I'm not rejecting that. But in this topic, of course, I want to talk about the problem that is there for the middle class. And that problem itself is a very big problem that is there. And sometimes, because of the economic nature of problems, because of social nature of problems, the education you have, the job you want to do, the life you want to live, and the debt you carry to maintain such a thing. And when the economy that you live in, the commerce, the way of commerce is done, demands from a middle class family to live in such and such a way, and you have to spend money to maintain that, a different set of problems are created all along. And then different kinds, those problems for the middle class are unique for the middle class itself. It is like living in a knife edge. Like, your life have to go perfectly, without any financial troubles, without any personal troubles, without any troubles in your health, without failing a single exam, without failing failing in other sectors, courses, degrees, so on and so on. And every decision that you make in your life have to be perfect to maintain the middle class life. You always have to be successful to move up the ladder to and become rich, but you always have to be right. You always have to pass. You always have to be healthy just to maintain a middle class life. Failure is not an option. Making a wrong turn is not an option. Being sick is not an option. Not having income because of of things that you cannot control, like a pandemic situation or a flood or a typhoon hitting and your small business going down, or your office started laying off people. Even like that will disrupt the middle class, and in an individual level, that the middle class person is living in such a stressful way, in such a stressful, it's just every life decision, everything that is there to maintain the middle class is always about threading the needle. If you don't, and that is it, you fall down. And nobody, even whatever the category you are in the economy, like you are high earning, low earning, or middle class, you like to move forward, you don't like to move back. And being in that middle class position is very hard. So I think it is time for the governments around the world, it is time for the financial people around the world to maintain this society that we have built, to maintain this economic system we have built. We have to come up with something to make a strong middle class. When you say middle class, maybe in the next 10 years time, a person who will have extra cash with them in the bank for a rainy day, a rainy day fund, a person with a rainy day fund, a person without debt to the society, where there is no credit card bills to be paid, or like some kind of a financial stability is there. When you say middle class, then we can actually define the proper middle class. The middle class of maybe in the 1970s, 1960s of United States. It's but today, the way things are going, either there will be a category that there will be always a category that will be defined as middle class, but they are not the true middle class. They are people who are trying to maintain economic system by living on a knife edge. It is basically like that. And when you have a society that depends on the interactions of the middle class, I think the middle class should be treated much more better. But in today's economy, when you get richer and richer, the lives get it easier. But as I told you, everything have to go perfect and in your way to go to that level, and that doesn't happen because we live in a practical world, not in a theoretical one, where unfortunate things happen beyond our control and without our notice. Well, it it is a mad ramble, and I rambled on for a long time. I this was a thing that was inside my head that I wanted to let out, because being middle class is not easy. Though the society and the economics put you in a pedestal, the size of the when the size of the pedestal is the size of a knife blade, it is a very stressful life. It is a hard life. More than hard, it's a stressful life. The problems, the psychological problems are more than the physical problems. Well, I think that is something that a trade-off to being middle class, or is this a failure of the society, or is this a thing in, is this a pretext for things to come in the future? We don't know. But this ramble was based on that thought, being middle class and the burdens that there are. So I hope that it was thought provoking. Have a good day. Be safe, be healthy, Aibowan.